Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as CDH. I'm one of your hosts, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Matt, aka Null.
Hey everyone.
Reed, aka Sickrobot.
How you doing?
And Morgan, aka Spleenface.
What's up?
In this episode, we'll be covering a Tier1Con tournament recap. We did a lot of there was a lot of fun going on at Tier1Con in Copenhagen, and that was just a super fun weekend. And we figured we'd we'd go into it. We'd cover what happened, and definitely has nothing to do with the fact that maybe people want to hear from the winner of Tier1Con. Definitely.
No, not at all.
No, none of that.
Could never do that.
This is kind of a long subtitle, to be honest.
Yeah. So since the last episode, what have you guys been doing? Winning tournaments, going to Copenhagen. We've all been doing the same thing, man. We've all been
a primarily potato-based diet.
Oh my god.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, cool. So without further ado, let's jump into housekeeping. And oh boy, what a housekeeping section we have. We have 6 new patrons.
Wow. That's awesome.
Which definitely has
Thank you, guys.
nothing to do with the fact that we haven't recorded for a month and have just been it would have been 3 and 3, but
It does sound and feel good to name them all out at once.
Okay, so big shoutouts to Thaddeus G,
Noah L,
the Mana Web,
Deco A.
Chili P.
and Taya A. You rock.
Yeah, I was gonna look for someone else to say it.
We gotta make sure that
Good job,
that's
man.
not
Yeah.
trademarked or something.
yeah.
We really should check that out eventually.
Actually get all of our
I like
episodes
to live
striked.
dangerously. Let's not check that out yet. We'll know it's trademarked when we get a cease and desist.
Imagine the
Exactly.
command zone just takes down our YouTube channel.
Oh my god.
we just get like 100 strikes at once. Just like all of our videos get striked all at once.
Yeah. So that's housekeeping and new developments. There was Tier1Con, which this entire episode is about. So we're not going to cover that. But new developments, we have the Playing with Power tournament,
Which happened this past
Saturday,
weekend as of time of recording, I think.
Kind of crazy. I mean, I guess the
21st.
Playing with Power guys got back earlier than we did. I was gonna say because we got back and then because we spent some extra time while we went to Copenhagen, and then afterwards we kind of went around Germany for a bit. We were in Europe, might as well do a bit of extra sightseeing while we're there. So then when we get back and I hear about, oh yeah, by the way, Playing with Power tournament just ended, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, people who played in Tier 1 played in the Playing with Power tournament.
In fact, the person who won the Playing with Power tournament played in Tier1Con.
Yeah,
Crazy,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so big shout out to Mr. Bruce.
Yep.
I guess we got in quite a few games with Mr. Bruce at Tier1Con. Very cool guy. He was playing Winota. Took down Playing with Power tournament with Winota, which, you know what? I was a bit of like a doubter of Winota before I played against it at Tier1Con. But that deck is sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's very, very sweet, yeah.
like I feel like it's honestly like if you're playing Winota into a pod that isn't presenting like super early threats, that you can't really deal with, like the deck just spirals out of control so quickly, and like it's so hard to stop with anything less than like a Toxic Deluge or an Overloaded Cycrypt.
And no one be playing Deluge anymore.
No one's playing that. Surprisingly.
I mean, like, you could play Deluge, though.
You could.
You
could.
definitely could. Is anybody going to? Probably not.
Hey, I might.
Oh my
And
god.
Morgan is single-handedly going to stop the Winota menace. Cool.
Cool.
Thanks,
beans.
Morgan.
Dude, don't say
they
Winota
have to-
Menace, man. Winota.
It sucks that Angel of Jubilation isn't a human, so you can't like hit it off of Winota triggers and then just insulate yourself against Toxic Deluge. Can you imagine?
Oh, yeah.
That's why I'm
That'd
gonna
be
play
awesome.
Damn.
Oh my god, dude! I saw Damn over the weekend. It it was like just not good because the person was just like in a dominating position and had the counter magic already. But it was like very close to just like completely wiping a board of a bunch of very relevant creatures.
That is what wraths tend to do.
Yeah. Who'd have guessed?
Yeah, so also shoutouts to the rest of the top four. Veyron on Jund Doomsday, VT on Najila, and Raymondo on Najila as well. You know, I think all the Najila players skipped out on Tier 1 Con and just went to this playing with power tournament
Yeah,
instead.
I think I saw like one Najila player, maybe.
Kind of crazy, yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to say Najila players, other than the Sisay player who had a Najila in his deck, but
yes,
it may have been.
There were multiple Sisay players at Tier 1 Con, right?
Yep.
I'm not getting that wrong. Yeah.
Wow.
That being said, I did want to say though, Veyron playing Jund's Doomsday. So he was playing Casket Tana, Doomsday, which actually, funnily enough, I had talked with him a bit because he initially got into that deck because I had like a rough sketch that I'd played a couple of games with. I think Morgan was sort of a part of my brainstorming of it, of like trying to make Casket work with Doomsday and then like using like Tana to generate like tokens and stuff. And I had sort of put it down because like I didn't really think much of it. I thought it was like neat but not that great. And then Veyron picked it up and apparently took it to a top 4 finish here. So good job, man.
I mean, Casket is just one of those things that you can resolve and no one's gonna counter it, and it's clearly very well synergized with Doomsday.
Yeah, exactly. And then yeah, I mean, there's also like some other interesting stuff that you can do with like Tana and like there's some neat stuff in the deck. So
cool. Well, on to the main topic, which is kind of a tier 1 recap and breakdown post-mortem. So first things first, the event in general. I think we kind of just wanted to get this out of the way and say, it was just super cool to get to see a bunch of people who we only know through like online, meet a bunch of new people as well, get to see a bunch of interesting decks, and just have good times all around. That was just super fun. Probably my favorite aspect of the tournament. I mean, obviously going to Copenhagen, playing the tournament, awesome. The event was super well run. Big ups to the guys at Tier 1, and the tournament organizers. But I think kind of on a similar note to all previous like GPs and CDH meetups I've gone to, it's all about meeting the people and just having a good time with friends.
Yeah, putting the Discord nicknames to the names to the people.
Yeah, that's
which is funny. It's funny coming from Matt because Matt, I'm not sure that you knew the Discord names before seeing the faces in the first place.
No, I think I have a very unique perspective.
Yeah, I was also saying to Matt and Morgan before the show as well. It's actually really awesome to get to play with like a bunch of these people on their personal decks and stuff. Specifically from like it's a huge diversity of different people playing different lists, because if you're playing online, like anybody can play online, but there's like a lot of like sort of segmented play groups online between like the different servers and like private play groups and stuff like that.
Time zones, man. Time zones.
And time zones too. So it's really like, and you don't really get to play with like absolutely everybody, even though it's the internet. And with like online tournaments, you don't really get that like time to get in just like fun casual games with people, just like pickup games. So being able to get in those pickup games with people with like their pet decks or like alt decks or whatever was really cool, because it's like you just get to see a bunch of builds that you haven't necessarily seen online before or gotten to play against even.
And yeah, along playing with people online, we got to play with a bunch of Europeans whose time zones, just don't line up well with North America's often. So that was super cool. Also, really, really fun to get in some, face-to-face Magic again. It's been far too long. And, people there, I remember there's some people maybe had some concerns, like, with all the coronavirus and pandemic and all that stuff. But, the events and kind of the regulations and everything going around that, everyone getting like double vaxxed and all that stuff. It was, It was solid.
Yeah, it was handled
safe.
very well. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was, I mean, to even anybody getting into the country from outside EU or Schengen countries had to be double vaccinated and have a negative COVID test, and then like to get into the convention itself every day, like every time you wanted to leave and come back in, you had to present paperwork, which I'm pretty sure was also vaccination plus negative test. So
I think that was vaccination or negative test, but
okay,
that's
yeah.
yeah.
It was very tight controls the entire time. So,
and I think for the first day there was also a limit on the number of people in the hall, though Denmark actually relaxed their restrictions like on the Saturday. Which was kind of funny, but
yeah, the Tier 1 guys just have that kind of influence.
Exactly.
Yep. Huge amount of pull.
Yeah, so I mean, beyond just the tournament, anyone who tuned in for the stream, I guess you could also presumably check out like the VOD if any of you guys want to rewatch some of the stuff that's going on, get some coverage, which by the way was just super awesome. Just super well run event overall, and especially like the live coverage. It was crazy. As the live finals were going on, I was checking Twitch and I saw that Tier 1 was the second channel on like at the top of Twitch for Magic. That's just huge for CDH. That's unbelievable. It was just so cool to see. But yeah, so before the tournament, there was a game show and a panel. So Morgan was on the panel for us with a bunch of other content creators, and then for the game show, Reed was our representative, and he had a pretty dope experience partnering with Jesper Icing as his teammate. So, Reed, you want to talk about that? Yeah.
I definitely wasn't also on the game show.
No, Morgan,
don't mind me.
Was on
I was going to say it, but then
you were.
Into the...
You had to swap out last minute or something, right?
Yeah, they literally, one of the people who was supposed to be on the game show just, like, left, and then they couldn't, they were like, where is he?
They couldn't find like two of the participants, so they had to sub in Morgan.
I know. Poor them.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I got to team up with Jesper Icing for the trivia game show, which was pretty great. And actually there were a couple of categories which were basically like Pictionary categories. So I mean, definitely was a benefit to have actual factual magic artist Jesper Icing.
At one point they were both contributing to the same whiteboard with
that is true.
Reed, was it a benefit? What does the set symbol for Commander Legends look like again? Can you remind me?
Hey man, I never claimed that we were actually good at doing the other job, but
it was funny. Me and Matt were in the audience, and they I think one of the first things that Jesper was drawing was Thassa's Oracle.
Yeah, it was. Oh my god,
he draws the Thassa's Oracle. Good. He signs it, and then I'm like Matt, they can't erase this now, right? And then they started to erase it, and I was like, no!
I almost
what
got
are
up.
You doing? Yeah.
I almost just like took the whiteboard and abandoned society at that point onwards.
I should have had a second
whiteboard. But there was another drawing that lasted for the entirety of the rest of the convention on that whiteboard, which was a collaboration between myself and Jesper Icing drawing the Art of Soaring as a tiebreaker. Which was then signed by both of us and stood for the entirety of the rest of the event.
This was really just Reed's event, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
I was really happy in the game show. So I was teamed up with Ian from like Comedian, and I failed to draw a silence for him, which that was a tough one.
That was the hardest one to draw.
But then he got Timna. And he drew, like, a circle, 2 lines across it. And I immediately just went, Timna! And people were like, what? I'm like,
yeah.
She's blindfolded, right?
Like, I definitely didn't get it that quick.
Yeah.
But it was, that game show was a ton of fun. And I guess before we move on, the panel was also pretty cool. So that was Ball from Split Second, me, Ryan from Playing with Power, Lynch from I Hate Your Deck and Ian again, and we got to answer some questions from the audience, plus some questions they'd planned ahead of time, and just talk about where we think CEDH is and where it's going and the future of the format, and that was pretty cool as well.
Cool. So getting into the actual tournament itself, I think maybe a good place to start is about our deck choices. So what decks did everyone take? Let's start with Matt. Yeah.
Funny question. Yeah, Matt, why don't you tell us about it?
We could end on Matt. Well, I took, what was it, last year's, the year before's, Into the North recommended top deck, Razzacats.
Nice.
With some updates, but pretty close to kind of the stock list.
Some good stuff. I actually didn't look at the list, I don't think. How did you, because I think, didn't we, or not we, sort of, but wasn't, Salvagers ripped out of that in favor of, Twister Hull Breacher stuff? And then I hadn't really looked at it after Hull Breacher was banned, so, did you?
That was
Salvagers goes back in.
I was the only one who ever took out, just for clarity, I was the only one who ever took out Salvagers. Everyone was still on it, even while Hull Breacher was legal.
Okay.
So I pretty much made space for Ranger Captain, Esper Sentinel, Fiend Artisan, Eldritch Evolution, because I was kind of trying to play more to the Hate Bearer style, I guess.
I mean, it's definitely. I feel like that in that deck, what's it called? A Ranger Captain is certainly a very solid include that you want to find space for.
Yes, definitely. And I think, at least on paper, Fiend Artisan kind of providing the uncounterable Ranger Captain, so uncounterable Silence or uncounterable Thassa's Oracle. At least it sounds good. In the actual tournament, I didn't really get to experience that as much because I just didn't have Fiend Artisan hands. But yeah.
It's definitely interesting. A lot of the choices you made were certainly felt like they were designed to counter Turbo. You added in the. I know you were looking at adding in Force of Negation. Ranger Captain has that rattlesnake effect against stuff like Nas. And then Fiend Artisan.
I almost got to Archon of Emeria, but I decided against it based on your advice because it just isn't a card you can easily crack.
Yeah. But Fiend Artisan is almost going in the opposite direction, right? And I mean, I guess I sort of see the logic where you try and play a deck that's very difficult to interact with, and then you add extra interaction as well to stop the turbo players. But it feels a little bit. It feels different than some of the other changes you made, going in the opposite direction.
I think I can definitely help you with understanding my point of view when we talk more about kind of our deck selection process. But
sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, before we get into the selection process, let's just wrap up what everyone else was taking. So I took, I guess here actually we'll go with Reed and Morgan because you guys were on same lists basically.
We were in fact on the same list basically. I took, as you might know by now, I took Cody. It's sort of the deck that I've been testing, not really secretly, I guess, but certainly not in open testing. It's been I've been doing the testing behind closed doors for a few months at this point, a couple months, but it's not exactly a secret that I've been playing the deck. And yeah, I mean, I came up with a reasonable 99 that I figured was pretty strong, and then of course, as is tournament tradition, made some last minute changes to it. And then along with that, it seems like Morgan thought it was also a good idea to bring Cody.
Yeah, okay. I just kind of realized I don't think we ever actually said that Reed won. So just in case you're
just get
we're dancing around
get it out of the way.
You may already know from the episode title on your platform, but
possibly.
I do in fact control the episode titles.
Yeah, so I didn't want to take Cody, but basically
okay,
through
sure.
through like Reed's testing, which I was often on the other side of.
Subjected to
just like touch on that for a second. Yeah, sorry. Just to be clear, a lot of the testing that I did was with Morgan and Lyndon and a bunch of the QMTG guys. So I do want to shout out specifically Keegan and Zach for sticking around and
for being good sports and playing.
Yeah, suffering through Cody games almost like semi-daily for like 2 months straight.
Yeah. So like in the testing, it wasn't actually winning like that high. It wasn't actually winning like that high an amount in our group, but it was winning a decent amount in like an incredibly hostile meta with incredibly hostile play. And like I just kept seeing him make these like double protected turn 3s or like single protected turn 2s, and just the like incredible consistency with which you were going off on turn 2 and 3 with protection. It was just like it was like really hard for me to turn that down.
Yeah.
And you can just surprise people, right?
I mean that's certainly the other half, right?
Or even without surprising people, like sometimes people just don't keep hands that can stop a single protected turn 2 win, right? Like
which I mean we might get into later on that, but yeah, like
we might, yeah.
And then so my list, so I guess Reed kind of touched on his refinement of the list and playtesting. So I know initially a lot of the work was done kind of like when Profane Tutor was first spoiled. And there were some VCs on the Frog server where, you were talking about stuff, and that kind of spawned a fork in the build for that myself and my brewing partner Kibitson from the Frog server worked on.
The Untappers build was definitely forked.
Yeah.
So we have a Untappers build of Cody that utilizes a bunch of crappy draft shaft commons that untap Cody for a single mana. So you activate Cody, cast an untapper, trigger Cody, untap Cody, activate Cody again, and then you can trigger him a second time. So the idea being that it's you run Profane Tutor, and then you also run Pact of Negation, so that all of these are a guaranteed way to get protection. So that's the build I ended up taking. We've been working on it kind of in parallel for a while, and then we kind of put it to the side. But it was mostly kind of just theory crafting and gold fishing and stuff. I never actually tested any games because after seeing Reed play enough games with Cody and being subjected to that, I very much quickly realized that I hate this deck. Cody fucking sucks.
Yeah, actually,
it is miserable to play against, and it's miserable to play.
We should get that out of the way for the record. Just like to get that down on the record, because we're like, how many minutes?
We all hate Cody.
Yeah, we're like 23 minutes in. I don't think any of us actually like Cody. Aside from being the winningest deck that we could think of to bring to a tournament. The deck's play patterns are incredibly toxic. It like the quote that I keep coming back to because it's like such a good representation of the deck plays is literally just Cody is the deck to pick if you want to play the least amount of CDH in a game of CDH. It's like you're like just turning your brain off and just slamming an early Cody and going for an early win attempt.
It really is kind of its own mini game, and I think we'll have a discussion about that when we get to the story section a little bit. But
yeah,
it's like kind of its own version of Magic, which doesn't feel good for the rest of the players.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically just an interaction check at the rest of the table, and then like you succeed on the check as the Cody player and just end the game in like less time than it took to resolve mulligans, or like you get stopped and then you just have to sit at the table doing nothing for like the next half hour to hour.
And so much of it comes down to winning dice rolls, right? Like Cody can present a protected win so consistently and early enough that really what you're looking for is if you get the turn, so like turn 3 is like you're going off turn 3 every time, like almost always with protection. So if you win the die, like and then you get your occasional turn 2s.
Yeah.
But if you win the die roll, or like you're going first or second, you're getting your turn 3 before half of the pod, and it's and you've got protection already, so you're just curbing their development turns, and that's kind of what you're trying to do. You're just trying to win the die roll, and then just go off before people are normally presenting interaction or they're still in their development phase. But yeah, and I just also wanted to say that my arrival at Cody, so I'd kind of been working on this Cody deck in the background, never really with an intention to play it or like main deck it, maybe just for tournaments, but it was mostly just kind of a theory craft mini project that we were doing. But, you know, similar to Morgan, after playing against Reed a bunch of times, and I went through a bunch of different decks so I wanted to take to Tier1Con. I really didn't want to take Cody. And then in the end, I was like, I guess it's just the best deck, and I'd feel bad not playing the best deck because at this in my kind of perspective, there's going to be one tournament where this is a surprise, right?
Yeah,
I think
exactly,
people were
right? Yeah.
very low on Cody, and kind of we've been talking in private among some of the other people who knew about the deck as well, just saying like it's crazy that people don't see this. They are way underestimating Cody. Like we kind of knew it was the best deck, and in amongst ourselves we had discussed the ethics of whether or not we want to unleash Cody on the CDH kind of meta more broadly.
Yeah.
And being like, listen, if Cody does well at Tier1Con, lots of people are going to play Cody, and it's going to ruin their play groups, at least for a time. So maybe this is something that like we could just keep secret, but then, you know, in the end we kind of decided that.
I think it's kind of an inevitable build, and I'm kind of happy you guys brought it to a tournament rather than it just kind of popping up in play groups.
Yeah,
because it is the most appropriate place for that deck, right?
Yeah, it's certainly, it's like the tournament, or like at least like my tournament deck right now. Like it's I think I described it during the tournament as like my business deck. Like this is it's the deck
Honestly,
that I play to do business and to not do anything else.
Reed, I think you kind of forgot to shout out everyone who like dumped on the deck publicly 6 weeks ago. Honestly, huge help.
Yeah, honestly, dude. Actually, I'm not sure. Like, I guess it's sort of, I guess it helped by like sort of quashing the hype around it, because I made that like one tweet. I don't want to get into this like too much, but because I made that like one
Twitter
tweet.
Twitter drama.
Well, no, not about the Twitter drama, but just like because we're sort of getting off track a bit here. But I made like one tweet when I made like the initial Cody build, or at least my initial Cody build, and then played like a couple of games with it, and like it was already doing stupid things, and I was just like, yeah, just confirming that like it's as dumb as you think it is with Profane Tutor, and that sort of blew up. Then Ian made a video on it, and I mean, people were sort of taking it as hype, and then I think like there were a lot of people sort of counter pushing against that to sort of quash the hype on it a bit, which yeah, I guess sort of might have helped a bit, because like certainly if the hype train had taken off on Cody in full, I think that we certainly would have had a harder time surprising the field with it.
Yeah, the real if you guys wanted to know Cody was the best deck before it was the best deck, you guys should have been following our friend Zach on Twitter, who months ago tweeted, hot take, Cody is the best deck in CDH. Dude, that was after he played against a bunch of games against Reed. Yeah.
Now an ice cold take.
Yeah. Cool. So how did everyone? Oh, do you have more stuff?
No, sorry. Yeah, I was thinking for like so we were gonna go through the deck selection process leading up to the tournament. So I sort of figured we should do it in like the most brief to the least brief selection process. Like me, Morgan, Lyndon, Matt.
I think mine is very brief because I already talked.
I feel like yours is the second least brief, right? Like
mine.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know. I feel like this story of me like choosing to bring Cody was just I tested it a bunch, thought it was really good, and then brought the deck. Whereas like you actually had some flip flopping, Lyndon had a lot of flip flopping, and then we have no idea what Matt's process was.
All right, I guess.
Sure. Okay. There we go. We basically summarized it.
Yeah, we used up all that time describing what the process could have been.
I mean, so like the whole thing was that like I built Cody when it came out. I spent a lot of time testing with it because I thought the deck was good, and this is shown from my involvement in Hulk when Flash was still legal. Like even if a deck isn't particularly enjoyable to play, if I think it's really good and other people aren't exploring it, I'm going to put it in the time to optimize it, because I think like good decks deserve to have their optimized forms out in the world as soon as possible, just so it's like out and people know about it. So I just spent a lot of time optimizing Cody, and then I thought it was a really good deck, and I brought it.
Morgan, you were next.
Yeah. So I was thinking about probably bringing some sort of Cats build, or potentially like a Thrasvile, meta ball type deck. And I was also considering Cody if I wanted to just play like the sort of turbo strategy, which I didn't really want to. Like, that was certainly not something I was excited about. And I'm definitely a player who likes to feel like they have a chance to win every game, and I think that turbo decks often don't. Like, if they get stopped earlier or some stacks comes down, it's very easy to just be like, all right, this game is over, 5 turns before it's over, whereas I think that that's much less true with a deck like Cats. But just watching Reed test and play Cody and just present these crazy super early wins, and my experience in some tournaments, particularly like the Mean 16, where like that was like a very heavily turbo tournament, made me think that like presenting particularly protected early wins was like one of the best things you could be doing into a sort of open tournament meta.
Yeah.
So for me, my initial kind of idea was, I generally do not like playing meta decks into tournaments just because I think it's more fun to be a hipster. So I did the same thing with the last webcam Tier 1 tournament. I took a Brawl deck that I'd been testing. In this tournament, I definitely wasn't going to take Brawl because Brawl is not a good deck. I want to at least take something that's, maybe hipster, but on the fringes, but, better than Brawl. So I was looking at some different custom brews that I'd been working on. So like a Thras Bruce list, which I ended up scrapping. Then I was looking at Riel, which I'm still testing with, and it's been a lot of fun, but just doesn't cut the mustard for a big tournament, I don't think. And then if it wasn't going to be that, if I was going to take a meta deck, like this is initially thinking, I was like, I'm probably going to take Cats, because I was going to take a version probably much stackier than Morgan's, like more similar to like a Timnatana build that I had previously. So I was going to build something like that, but obviously with Thrasios Timna, like good partners. So that was my initial thinking, and then after seeing Reed play Cody and then having worked on my Cody list in the background, I was like, well, I can take Cody while still feeling a bit hipster. So taking Cody is kind of, it's weird. It's weird that taking Cody is simultaneously hipster and not hipster, because obviously we were like some of the only people who were on Cody. But even then, I'm like, dude, Cody's too mainstream, man. I gotta take my dumb build of Cody. So
it's hipster. It just doesn't have the novelty of a hipster deck.
Yeah, yeah. So ended up deciding to take the Untappers build, and that's that.
So is this the second time Into the North has unleashed a new and entirely uncreative deck on tournament?
Dude, yeah, I guess so, man. Yeah. Hate this. At least, you know what? At least nobody really picked up Cheese Rush. I think like we had sort of like kept it as our tournament deck for a while after that. I'm not sure I ever actually saw anybody else playing Cheese Rush.
I don't think it did well past the first NSL, right?
I don't think so. I played it as a tournament deck.
I made it to the finals of the Time Twisted 4, and I think
you
made semis with that. And
right, yeah.
I played a game with it in Marchesa, and I won that game, so that's cool.
And then you continue to play Cats for the rest of the tournament.
I just wanted a break.
Yeah, we sort of just played it as our tournament deck, I feel like, in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like our tournament decks for a long stretch there were like just Cats and Cheese Rush.
Also, Reed, you top 16'd multiple of the Tier 1 cons on the deck, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Like, I think
I'd have to go back through but yeah.
I think that people like don't necessarily realize that the difference between top 16 and top 4 is literally a game, and like top 1 is 2 games. I think like of course now I say this after, it's a tournament that I didn't win, but I said this before the tournament started. I have witnesses,
and I fully agree with
just being a salty
no.
bum.
I'm putting up an energy shield. I fully support the statement that Morgan's about to say.
No, I support it as well.
that people hugely overvalue winning tournaments and hugely undervalue consistently doing well. Like, there's lots of people who enter a bunch of tournaments and like make semis all the time, or like often show up in finals pods, and then because they don't win, like their name isn't the one that gets, blasted out over Twitter, and then you just kind of forget. But like, if you're consistently top 16ing a tournament like the online tier 1 cons, that meant that you were going like usually something like 2-1-1 or better, like, or even 2-2 consistently over several tournaments, is like obviously a pretty impressive win rate. Like, if you're just consistently winning half your games in tournament, and so like I think that often gets swept under the rug, whereas going 0-3 at 3 tournaments in a row, and then going whatever it is 3-1, and then winning your semis and winning your finals pod, gets you a lot of recognition. So like, with a deck like Cheese Rush, like we took it to Time Twisted 4, where it came 1 top 16, 1 top 4 finish, and then retook it to several top 16 finishes at Tier1Con, and like, anything can happen in one game. I don't think that necessarily defines like how good a deck is.
Well, yeah, we'd speculated that if Cody hadn't won, if Reed hadn't have won, whether or not people would have kind of still been low on Cody. And I mean, we can't. Answer that
a lot of people are still low on Cody, which dude. First of all, I respect that. I respect if you're low on Cody and then it wins a tournament and you're still low on it. I respect that a lot, because you're standing firm in your ideals, and like I totally get not wanting to, like, not letting a single tournament result change that.
I mean, I respect the idea of being low on a deck after it wins a tournament. I don't necessarily respect that about Cody specifically, because it did like exactly what Cody proponents advertised it to do.
Yeah.
And
anyway, I don't want to distract anyway from this too much, because we do still have Matt, and I feel like we all really want to hear about Matt's selection process.
Okay. I can do that then. So it's mostly premised on the fact that I knew I did not have a lot of time to actually play Magic, which is obviously one of the most important things that you should probably do before preparing for a tournament. So generally speaking, bad example. But in light of that, I thought that maybe a data-oriented approach would be the best approach here. So I looked at the deck list database, sifted it, came up with my like 10-ish decks or whatever that I thought would actually have a good shot at this tournament. And then I classified them based on what common stacks pieces they play well around and what common stacks pieces interact with them really hard. And then I came up with both early, mid, and late game scores, just kind of like based on gut feeling. And I also came up with a couple premises. So I thought that because we'd be playing in person, the games would, generally speaking, be played quicker, and I think that was true in retrospect. So that was a good idea there. So I put a lot of value on decks that can do well in the mid game, because I don't think any deck can play to the late game in a CDH tournament that has a round timer. Like, that's just crazy. Like, medium is not going to do well in a tournament when the round timers are 75 minutes or whatever it was. So that brought me, based just on scores, I narrowed it down to Najeela, Anala, Cheese Rush, Katz, and Cody were like my top picks. And then, like, for more information, I ranked Najeela the lowest and I ranked Cheese Rush the highest. But what I kind of realized was cats kind of just plays like enough, like a broad enough set of hate that in a pod, I think you have a high chance of sticking 1 or 2 hate pieces and actually generating like a crazy advantage. Also, another factor in like CDH is, valuing off of cards like Fish, Tithe, Remora, and this deck just runs the most of those types of cards, at least, or like the strongest ones in my mind. So I chose cats, and then starting from that, I was like, well, okay, if I'm confident in the hate bearer package, I want to make sure that I can actually select the right hate bearer in most of my games. So I went deeper on the creature tutors. So Eldritch Evolution and Fiend Artisan kind of stood out to me. And I've just and then also I just been generally impressed with Ranger Captain, so it kind of all made sense to me.
Nice.
That's super interesting because I was not privy to like any of that process. Before this, like this is the first time I'm hearing about that process, and that like simultaneously makes a lot of sense and is super interesting to me.
Yeah, I'd say if anyone wants to or wants to kind of emulate that model for their own deck selection process for tournaments, I think that's a great model to follow.
Especially if like you don't have the time to test.
Yeah,
I'd say like unfortunately enough, like testing and jamming games with a bunch of different lists that you think are like potential candidates is probably like solely the best way to prep for a tournament. But I think that is a fantastic method to run through if you don't have a bunch of time to like test a bunch of lists, or like you don't have like the motivation to test a bunch of different lists.
I would say it's probably something that you should actually do in tandem with testing, because testing to get a lot, like sufficient testing for a single deck takes more games than most people have time for. And if you have to narrow it down between 10 decks, most likely you're going to be spending most of your time testing decks and making your decision without even getting in like sufficient practice with the deck that you end up wanting to take. So that's a great way to just cut back on time required, and then you can actually just spend more time practicing with the deck that you end up wanting to take.
Oh, I guess I realized I did forget to talk about one of the lists that I actually put together and tested, considering taking it for the tournament, which was like a Kenrith Stacks Hulk list.
Oh yeah, right. I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
Which like I tried. Honestly, given the meta that was there, it might have actually worked out better than it did in testing, because I think there was less mid-range than there was when we were testing. But yeah, so like the idea was I was like, if I'm not going to be playing Turbo, I kind of want to be on like every anti-Turbo stack piece I can be playing, Rule of Laws in particular, more effects than just Collector Roof. And so I was looking at like Kenrith stacks with a Hulk to like more consistently close out the game, because Kenrith beats under like often those decks will just try and like stacks out the board completely, or maybe establish like paradox or possibility storm locks, and then just try and like beat your opponents to death with Kenrith, which like is absolutely viable when you don't have a 75-minute timer, because people play unbelievably slowly under stacks. It's like literally they can't cast spells, and their turns still somehow take like multiple minutes.
And I mean, so it's like, and unfortunately or fortunately as well, I feel like a lot of like it's harder to call slow play, or like to call a judge for slow play in CDH, and I feel like judges also tend to be a bit more lenient on slow play calls in CDH compared to like 60 card 1v1 formats. So it's so hard to force people to take like reasonable turns.
Yeah, the board states definitely do get complex, so like there's often times where a lot of thinking is necessary. But yeah, so I was like, I want to be able to close the game out in a reasonable amount of time, which put me onto Hulk, which Kenrith does reasonably efficiently. And we worked out that we're talking about piles, and it was actually the Tavern Swindler Frenetic Efreet pile, which is the most slot efficient pile that we could
You
find
can
that like,
find,
works through. Like, obviously, breakfast plus Thoracle or like Spellseeker Thoracle stuff is pretty efficient. It gives you a better backup, but it plays really poorly with Rule of Laws. And so like just having that 2-card pile. But I just found that like even if I could often stacks out the early game, the deck like had a really bad sort of mid-game transition. And I felt that there was a decent chance that I would like stacks out, like I could stacks out like a Rog Silas player, for example, in the early game. But like if I tried to stacks out something like Timna Crom, a lot of the time they would just like play Timna, play Crom, start drawing cards, start beating down and like develop the advantage before I could, land Kenrith and start using his abilities to like generate the value that would carry me into the long game.
Yeah, because like you're spending your turn 2 casting Rule of Law, and then they just go, okay, I'll spend my turn 2 casting Timna, and now like suddenly like you're both under the same symmetrical effect, except they have a Timna in play ahead of you, and then like theoretically they end up
and then
with
like I
spend
spend turn 3 casting some like mana thing, and then on turn 4 I'm casting Kenrith, and like by that point they have Timna and Crom, and then on turn 5 I start activating Kenrith, and then it's like I'm already so far behind that
yeah. This might be a bit of a hot take, but in 5 colors, like I think there's enough hate bear, like there's enough breadth in like what hate bears can actually hate on that you don't even necessarily need like Rule of Laws to hate out turbo decks or whatever you want to.
I definitely wanted Rule of Laws.
yeah, but like Delphi into like turbo decks or
that's definitely
it's like
there are definitely good options that are not Rule of Laws, but I think also Kenrith plays very nicely with Rule of Laws because you have like different types of utility from him. Particularly, the reanimate ability is something that like drawing cards under Rule of Laws isn't bad, but it's hard to leverage drawing a bunch of extra cards when you can still only cast 1 spell per turn. But like reanimating your pieces as people try and remove them, messing with combat by like putting counters on stuff, having a pseudo stacks effect against Thoracle wins by forcing draws, like all of that felt like it played nicely together, and it sort of the testing revealed that part of like not necessarily that like the theory was wrong, but that something that wasn't accounted for in the theory was like a bigger factor than I initially thought.
So next up we have on our show notes, we have the refinement process for our decks. And I think we can try and keep this somewhat short because we kind of covered a lot about our decks already. For me, it was my refinement process was, once a lot of the refinement had been done already through goldfishing of the deck, and just kind of refining it with my ring partner and with running it with a bunch of other people in the Frog server, and kind of arriving at a list that we liked. That's how it went for me. What about you guys?
Yeah, my refinement process was showing Morgan the list and making sure that I wasn't insane.
And you generally weren't. I think there were like a couple.
The Fiend Artisan was insane, I guess. But
there were like a couple cuts that I was like, I'm not sure about that, but I think like looking at where you wound up, because I did wind up playing the list, there was nothing that I was like, wow, this is missing, or like, wow, this is crazy that I drew. So
yeah, almost cut Enlightened Tutor.
So close.
Yeah, that would have been sus.
Morgan, do you want to go first? Because I just feel like I have a bit more to say on this one.
I mean, sure. My refinement process was forking Reed's list at a certain point, and then talking with him about like 3 card swaps. Really wanting to cut misdirection, and then ultimately listening to him and not cutting misdirection, and putting in Thoughtseize because I didn't like Days.
True. And then us also like mutually convincing each other to run Stern Dismissal.
Yep.
Before the tournament.
I'll say I also I'd looked at Stern Dismissal in my list before. Yeah. And it's like Stern Dismissal wasn't like, just seat of the pants, like, let's Stern Dismissal, what a card, let's throw this in. Like, I mean, it's something
we had all been
about before.
We had all been aware of it for a long time and just like hadn't really put it in a deck for testing.
I saw Morgan and Reed, they're buying their Stern Dismissals. I'm like, yeah, shit. I'll put the Stern Dismissal as well. Yeah.
Just FOMO.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, so my refinement process was definitely a lot lengthier than my selection process, or at least more complicated than the selection process, I'd say, just because it's like, it was, it's sort of weird in that it was like, I was building my tournament deck as I was testing it, if that makes any sense, because like the build of Cody didn't exist before Profane Tutor was spoiled, and then I like basically started like building and playing with the deck as soon as Profane Tutor was spoiled. So I was sort of just like both refining the deck, like not for tournament, like I was just like refining the deck in general from a very rough state into like an actual playable deck. And then like I was also like refining it toward the end goal at some point of bringing it to the tournament. So it was sort of just a lot of like trying to make it work in a general sense and get to like a 99, like a generic 99 that I was happy with, and also like, okay, what do I actually think is good for bringing to the tournament at the same time, and trying to make a lot of trade-offs there, like ending up like thinking like, oh, I think I'm gonna want more removal for the tournament, and like maybe do a higher balance of removal versus counter magic than for the blank slate build, and then just like a couple of other things like that, and like other like incidental lines and small card packages and such.
Cool. And then our final thing on deck choices is, would you take it again? And I suspect Reed, Morgan, myself, our answers are all very similar, which is, for me at least, yes.
Yeah, I'd probably take it again. There are some qualifiers on that, in that like I think now people know how to play against the deck a bit better, and like now that in general, I think the general population is more aware that you need to respect it a bit more in the early turns. It definitely makes its job a bit harder, but I think it's still like a very strong deck to bring to a tournament, especially.
Sorry, I was kind of thinking about, would you, if you went back in time to run this tournament
again,
yeah,
I'd run it 100% again. Yeah, I think Cody for this tournament was 100% the correct call.
Okay, yeah, I would definitely.
There's two separate questions there, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
If we were doing this tournament over again, I would definitely take it again. Would I take it to the next big tournament? Probably not, honestly. I think
I'm kind of in the same boat, yeah.
I think that not necessarily that the deck's like not good enough, but I think first of all, it's just soul draining to play.
Yeah.
And like
not mentally draining, just soul draining.
Yeah, no, like it just doesn't feel good to play.
I was like on the second day of the tournament, I was sleep deprived. I like did not get a good sleep the night before, and I was actually just playing on autopilot for like the last game of Swiss, and then like sort of starting to wake up for semifinals. Like it's not a particularly draining deck to play. You just have to count mana and breach lines and stuff.
It's just like really not fun to play. It's not an enjoyable gameplay experience for me.
I'd say probably the most mentally draining part of it is deciding on mulligans in a tournament setting. It's not the gameplay at all. It's like deciding on like the tougher mulligans of like, it's a tournament. Can I afford to ship this back? Do I have to run with this hand?
I mean, that's super fair considering how fast the deck can play. Like you don't have very many draws. Like,
there's not many.
Doesn't actually change that much.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah, generally your opening hand represents something like 70% of the cards that you're uncertain about that you're going to see that game.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I think, and I'll definitely get into this a little bit more when we talk about like our matches and our games. I think that people in general, but also specifically with people who have any sort of reputation, will like over respect the deck to the point that like they will hate it out with play patterns that are not necessarily advantageous to them.
Well, it's definitely kind of like a new deck to hate. I think it actually is kind of unique in how you play against it, and I definitely understand some people having trouble with that.
The thing with I think CDH is that in kind of EDH generally with as a 4-player free for all kind of format, if the table decides one player is going to lose, that player is going to lose the game.
And the issue is that Cody presents a very visible threat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, Cody's going to be a deck that people will decide it's not going to win. Like because its wins are so like quote unquote like I don't know, spectacular doesn't feel like the right word, but it's like
impressive.
Yeah, it just like when it wins, it's like incredibly obvious what needed to happen for it not to win, and it doesn't seem like necessarily the biggest ask. And it also is a deck that just really looks like it has no game if you can stop its generic win attempt. So it's like one of the most tempting targets for people to just decide it's not going to win.
Yeah, so I think if I was to run this tournament back, I'd take Cody again, take my same list.
You would take
I guess I would take I'd take the Untappers build. Yep. I was very pleased with how the Untappers build did. I won all the games that I should have won, even a game that I shouldn't have won. And then I lost games that, looking back on them after, thinking about the things, really, I don't think there was anything I should have done differently, could have done differently, or would have done differently. So, I was just very pleased with its performance. Maybe I'd change a couple slots that I was kind of like iffier on, but that's maybe like, 3-4 slots max. Not enough to make like a super meaningful difference. So, yep. And then nice. I think Morgan's point about Cody in the future, I'd be more interested in taking a deck that beats the meta that or the game that happens after Cody's been stopped, while simultaneously contributing to stopping Cody decks. So I think the meta from now on is definitely going to be shaped by people anticipating Cody being there, and I do not want to be the Cody player in that case.
Nice. Cool. So if I knew what the tournament meta was going to be, I probably wouldn't have taken cats. But I'm still kind of working through that idea a bit, trying to integrate that into my thought process, because I do think cats like was a strong deck and certainly is a deck that could have won that tournament. But if I knew what the metagame was and I could change my decision, I would take something like Cheese Rush or Cody. Of those two, I'd probably pick Cheese Rush just because I'm like way more familiar with the deck, but obviously Cody just is probably the better deck. And then for the next tournament, I think it's in the same line. Like, it's going to be a turbo deck. And that's just kind of based on the kinds of games that I played. And there's multiple factors there. It's like the fringe CDH decks that make the late game hard, and the pace of play, and in a secondary sense, the round timer. Like I'd feel a bit more comfortable with a turbo deck that has a solid kind of multi attempt like cheese rush, where you have like 10 combos.
Yeah. Like you just have so much gas in that deck.
You're just like each one of your turns you're untapping and trying to win for the whole game, and I think that's like where you want to be, or where I would have liked to have been.
Cool. So our next category is on narratives leading into the event.
These are just some sample ones, by the way. I just wrote these in for show notes, but I don't know if you want to run with them. Go for it.
I think these are kind of interesting. So Matt was talking about not being familiar with Cody. which I think is kind of funny because one of the things that was interesting about my experience taking coding to the deck into the tournament, is that I had tested the deck 0 times. I'd only done theory crafting and goldfishing with the deck, and talking it over with other people as well. And you know what? I don't really think I needed the testing. I felt pretty confident with how the deck played. Goldfishing the deck is honestly very similar to playing it in person. It's just very straightforward.
Degree,
yeah. Like maybe some of the like backup lines are worth testing in a pod, but you also just have enough time to figure those out on the spot. So.
Well, I mean, I've definitely thought about like the backup lines, and I've definitely you come across some of that stuff in goldfishing, where at least the way I goldfish is like, I'm like, okay, what if there's this many counter spells or blah blah blah, and this gets stopped, and like how do I pivot here and blah blah blah, like that. I do test that sort of thing, but I wouldn't say like actual gameplay testing would have helped much. I think at least with the Untappers build, any kinds of refinements which. I guess the biggest kind of refinement would be how many Untappers does the deck want, and I think that just testing for that is kind of unpractical. You just want to get in goldfish data because it just can be done so much quicker. So yeah, I just goldfish the deck more if I want to refine it.
I mean, certainly, further, but, I think we had discussion before. I do not remember how it ended, but I think the other thing that's actually reasonable to have testing for is also just like the balance of interaction that you want, like how much removal do you want versus how much like counter magic do you want in a deck, because I think that is a thing that you probably I would only feel comfortable with that balance once I tested with the deck a bunch. But
see, I think that balance is something that you can kind of just determine from your, like you could just think about it and be like, how much stacks am I expecting to see? How much interaction do I want to be able to play around? And you can kind of arrive at that without testing, because the meta that you're testing with heavily impacts that decision, and the meta you're testing with tends to be pretty insular, depending on like I don't think you can get enough, like the tournament metas are fairly broad. Like I ran up against a Derevi stacks deck, which is something that I probably would have never tested against ever. And Deretti as well, a Deretti stacks deck. Yeah. So Derevi and Deretti, like I would have never tested against those, and those were some instances where I'd want more removal for enchantments or artifacts or whatever. And it's like you just have to kind of arrive at that decision, I think, independently of just testing a bunch of meta decks against each other.
Yep.
I mean, I think the other the one thing that I wish I could have gotten a bit more like practice or refinement in was like specifically how to mulligan in stacks matchups.
Yeah.
Because I think that was like one of the things where I was like, do I try and just go fast, like look for like a turn 1 or a turn 2? I mean, generally a turn 2. The deck doesn't really turn 1. Do I just try and look for the turn 2? Do I just like look for a hand that has like one of the bounce spells or something? Like what's the bounce spells can work really well, but they can also, like, sometimes people are sort of baited into not holding up interaction because they think Cody's stacked out, and then you can just like remove the stack space and win.
Especially with stuff that doesn't prevent the Cody activation, like if it's a rule of law,
like rule of laws, you can.
Yeah.
If it's rule of law, you just like activate Cody, bounce the rule of law, get your trigger, win. But also like if someone does have the interaction, then like it's a real problem because you can't protect it. Or like if it's a null rod, that can also be tricky. So like, do you just go for the fast ones? How does that change based on seeding? But like, obviously that's a pretty narrow, issue to have under consideration in your deck of like exactly how are you mulliganing versus specific matchups.
So our next little mini narrative was, can Matt uphold the honor of cats? So Matt, how'd it go?
I won a lot of games. outside the tournament. So I'm gonna go with to be determined.
Did you?
I don't know. I made like one play. I didn't make any cats-oriented play errors. I definitely played like the combo, and I definitely understood my lines particularly well, but I definitely didn't give it the win record that it deserves.
I guess actually that's one thing we should say is because we mentioned that Reed won, but we should give all of our records.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I went 2-3.
I went 2 draws, or 3 draws, 2 draws, a loss, and then I dropped to figure out our train tickets.
And we thank you very much.
Yeah, much appreciated.
We count that as a dub. We count that as a dub.
2 draws, 2 losses, right? Because it was 4 rounds.
Right, for the 4 rounds, yeah.
I went 3-1-1 in pools, and then lost my semifinal game. Ended 2-1.
And then I went 3-0-2 in the Swiss, so 3 wins, no losses, 2 draws, and then win in the semifinals and a win in the finals for I think a total of 5-0-2.
One thing that needs to be said is that Reed's draws are arguably more impressive than his wins.
They really are. I think I'm not sure who. I know Lyndon walked by my turn 1 game. I'm not sure if anybody else on the podcast
and Reed
did.
had only a mana crypt and Cody in play.
Yeah, for my no, not even Cody for that one because in the first game that I played at the tournament, I just for a majority of the game my only permanent in play was a mana crypt. Not non-land permanent, like permanent period. It was literally just a mana crypt.
That's another.
And I walked by multiple times and I saw that and I was like, how what is going on? Then I found out he drew and I was like, wow.
Another thing to mention about Cody is that someone I couldn't find the Reddit post again, but someone did an analysis of like 50 decks off the database, or like 50 decks, most of them off the database, and Cody was like the 3rd or 4th most interactive deck. Like it was like Baral, Curious Control, and then like Cody.
Yeah.
And so like it's a deck that when you like can't win, you are regrettably like reasonably effective at forcing draws.
Yeah, just like
it's somehow even more miserable of a play.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's up like a third of your deck is counter magic removal in like this turbo list. So like you fail to go for it, and then like every turn after you're just amassing all this interaction to stop the next guy, and then you just go to a draw because you tried to win the game and then you failed, and now you're just gonna ruin it for everybody else and not let anybody win.
If I can't win, no one can.
Which actually
draws are kind of favorable.
Yeah, hilariously enough, makes it a better tournament deck because you just go to time if you don't win.
Yeah. Yeah, like the game that I drew, I went for a turn 3 win, but there was a Kataki, a Silence, and a Force of Will, which was just enough to beat me. And then literally, was like spending the game interacting, stopping. So the Timnacrom player wheeled with a Douthie, taking the win cons from the Sisay player, and then it was just like, all right, let's just keep enough stuff off the board that he can't beat us to death in time, and then go to time.
It is like sorry, I do just want to say it is insane to like to just like read back some of the Cody win attempts that were made over the course of the tournament, and just like the fact that they didn't succeed. Anyway,
let's save some of these for match specific stories, which is our last 2 narratives leading into the event were Reed's slump and Morgan's hot streak, which you guys can comment on. I don't think we need to spend too much time on these, but yeah. What about Reed, your slump?
Yeah, I mean, so the whole, I feel like there's a whole narrative, and it's like it's not a good or a bad thing. I don't necessarily care that much. Great friends with Morgan. Don't really. Oh yes. I mean, like I'm fully supportive of Morgan in all of his results, and I'm sure it's the same way the other way.
Oops.
But the sort of the narrative over the past, I'd say, couple of years, something like that, is that I initially had like very good results a few years ago in like top 4 in some tournaments, winning the Spike Feeders tournament, that kind of stuff. And then sort of lately, Morgan has taken over in the winning role for Into the North, obviously doing very well in the Tier1Con qualifiers, winning I don't just winning a lot. I don't like. Do you want to list off your?
I mean,
your wins over the past 2 years.
The Tier 1 tournament too.
Yeah, also did very well in the tournament. Made top 16. Still on a hot streak. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, so this is why I object to you calling it a slump, because your slump was just you making semis over and over.
Yeah, but
like,
but
hardly a slump.
But it is a slump. It's like it's compared to the previous results, and especially like the rank season, the winning, and like it's definitely going from like the primarily winning role into a like competitive role, but one where I'm not winning anything.
Into
right?
a washed up has been.
Yeah, pretty. I mean, dude, it's what it feels like when you're in the midst of it, right? It's just like why can't I win anything? Like I just like can't quite get there every time that I try for it. I don't know, like so it feels like the end to that might have come, and it just I don't know, feels good. Feels like I'm getting back in the horse.
On to me when you let me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I guess my hot streak was, I mean, so collectively we won the Nexus Super League last summer,
NSL,
and then in the 2-color league on Nexus, my team won, and I won all the games that we won, which in fairness was I think 3. But yeah, you know, sometimes 3 draws and 1 win gets you into top 4.
Just good enough.
And then at Time Twisted 4, I made the finals. I won the first Tier1Con qualifier, top 4'd the next 2 on meme decks, and then won Marchesa. So that was my hot streak, and I guess it's all come crashing down. They put a price on my head at the tournament.
Dude, so having the bounty sleeves definitely lowered your win percentage there.
Yeah, so what they did was they gave them to me, and I think they gave them to Adam from Playing with Power.
Yep.
We had special sleeves that have, they say, there's a bounty reward, a dragon slain, and then like Tier1Con on them. They were custom made sleeves, and so I sleeved my deck in them, and then anyone who beat me got a pack of those sleeves, and then if they beat me in a feature match, they also got a pack of the new Dragon Shield dual sleeves that they were premiering at the event. So only one person claimed that bounty. Kolkio took them off me in round 5. They made me go on camera and give them to him. It was a whole thing.
Shame.
They made him.
I know, right? I mean, I asked them. They're like, "Yeah, so you're gonna give them to him on camera?" I was like, "Did you make Adam do that?" They were like, "No."
No.
All right, sure. So yeah, it was like a whole thing of, you know, can someone take me down? And yeah, turns out I do bleed, you know? Sometimes we don't get there.
Cool. So then we can move on to some match-specific stories from the tournament. And, you know, this is where I cut you off, Raiden, when you want to get into some specifics. But, yeah, any standout match stories from you guys?
Well, I can start out. I only have a quick one. So one of my draws was so very close to being a win. And I'm not like a salty draw person. I'm usually pretty humble about my draws. But in this particular case, it was like, we're in turns. I set up Notion Thief Wheel. And with enough mana to win, I'm pretty confident. And in my... so one of the players was eliminated. So in my 21 cards, I happen to have the Razaketh in hand. And... unfortunately, that was my last turn, and I was not able to untap. which would have provided me with enough mana to win.
I saw him.
The salty part is that he was like 10 seconds off from getting
Being
another
the active
turn.
player.
It was so rough.
I saw his hand. I saw like Entomb Animate Dead. I was like, oh, easy. Razzacat. I was like, oh. And you were like, you were 1 mana short of
on like
using
all,
survival
like,
to
tons
bin
of lines.
it. We like spent 10 minutes after the game like just blitzing through as many lines, and I was going deep. I'm like, if you cast life, then play the cradle, can you? And like, it just wasn't there.
There was and like there were a bunch of circumstances earlier in the game that like if we're slightly different would have also resulted in a win. Like at one point my token was bounced before my upkeep, and there was a smokestack, so I had to sack a land, and I was literally 1 mana short. So if that token wasn't bounced, I would have
so
had the
tragic,
land.
dude.
You know, like That's it.
I'll go for, I guess I'll do my match, instead of doing like every match specific story or like a match specific story, I'll just do a kind of a brief rundown of my experience of the tournament, and it'll be pretty brief. So I think, I mentioned before that I think Cody is a very dice rolly based deck where if you're going first or second, it can influence things greatly. So I did get somewhat unlucky this tournament, which is kind of why I thought I'd take the deck back again if I was to run it back. And I think hopefully if the die rolls go my way, I do a bit better, despite being pretty satisfied with my record. So I went first in round 1, which I won that. Then I went third, fourth. So not the best rolls. And then a lot of those turn orders didn't matter too much, except the last round where if I'd gone first or second, I would have gone for a turn 2 double protected win. But one of the guys the guy who went second, mulled to 4 for a Stony Silence, which was able to kind of lock things up, and then he ended up closing the game against 2 Kinnan players and a Cody with that Stony Silence. So pretty cool. And then
insane.
I think the only other interesting stuff from me was that I kind of got stacked out in my losses, but I did win a game through Chalice of the Void on 0, Thorn of Amethyst, Smokestacks, Tanglewire.
Just insane.
And taking a bunch of beats from a Paco and a Sarah Ascendant. I won that game. Should not have won, but I won. And then I also almost won through turn 1 Root Maze, turn 2 Thalia, turn 3 Deafening Silence. And the only reason I think the main reason I didn't win that is because I lost my turn 1 gamble. So I lost my crypt, and that keeping the crypt and then getting a Cody in play would have saved me with enough life. Because I took just infinite chip damage from Timna and Najila player. So I ended up having to Naws at 16 life. But if I had won the crypt roll or the gamble, would have had much more life from my Naws and could have potentially won that game, which is crazy considering the amount of stacks that were in play. So that's it for me.
Yeah, I have a few funny stories.
We could probably go back and forth for a couple of these then.
So I guess I'll start with round 1 where I wasn't playing, I was commentating because I had the bye from winning the first qualifier. But so I was commentating with Yannis, and like when you're commentating, sometimes you like it can be very difficult to tell like, oh, was this spell cast, in an end step, or are we in like an upkeep or what, things like that. And there was actually another Cody player at the tournament, and he activated his Cody. We assumed it was main phase, and then he cast a silence. He got silenced back, and we're like, well, that's unfortunate. He's going to exile his Profane Tutor, and then like you can't cast it, and then that like breaks the whole Cody thing because you can't get it back, right, and activate Cody again and try again. So we're like, well, that sucks. So he starts flipping. He flips into Pact of Negation. We're like, wait, what?
He's like Untapper's build?
We're like, is this an Untapper's build? But like, he flipped past a lot of the deck to get to the Pact of Negation, and we didn't see like a bunch of Untappers, right? Like we might have seen like Emerald Charm or
yeah.
Which, and then he untaps and like takes his turn, and we were like, what just happened here? Like did he just roll the dice on flipping into pact as like a bait or what? and then I think it turned out after the fact that he forgot that Cody would flip into pact, and like yeah, so that was kind of a funny thing. And I was commentating. I was like, okay, that's normally not what Cody does.
You gotta put the disclaimer on for the chat for the first time seeing Cody in the tournament, right? Yeah. So I mean, I guess to finish the story about my round one, was basically, I think, what was it? I think I went, like 7 without like a good hand, 7 without a good hand, 6 with like, I think it was, like, depletion land. Oh no, what was it? It was something like 2 lands. Oh, that's what it was. It was 2 lands and a jeweled lotus. Were the things that I had for the hand, and then like a free Cody trigger or something like that, but no other acceleration at my 6. And I was like, well, I mean, if I draw a soul land, this gets there on turn 3, but like this is gonna be like rough if I keep this and don't get there. Like I think I have to go lower. So I went to 5. I obviously looked at the top card, and it was a mana crypt, or it was a soul ring, I think, which still would have made it a turn 2. So I was like, oh great, well, whatever. We're going to 5. Went to 5, and it was, I think it was a spirit guide, a mana crypt, and that was my only mana sources in the hand. So I kept the hand on the assumption that, like, if I draw a land on turn 1, then it's still a turn 2, because you just go land crypt Cody, and then next turn pitch the spirit guide to activate, and you're good. If you draw land, if you miss the like draw on the first turn, but still get there on the second turn, it's still a turn 3, which is fine. So I was like, yeah, this is a fine 5. We'll just keep this one. So I was like, okay, well, we'll keep this. Hope it goes well. And then the Marin player going first just went, great, land root maze turn 1. And I was like, well, this, yeah, this sucks. This sucks hard. And then for the rest of the game, we just sort of got controlled by a Kinnan player. And the Kinnan player couldn't close it out in time, and we went to a draw, which was sort of incredible. I think probably the highlight of that game was getting the Marin player in the last turn of the game to Caustic Caterpillar his own root maze so that I could crack a fetch to Flusterstorm like a last ditch effort time twister from the Kinnan player.
Oh, can I jump in with a quick story? Because that reminded me of something. There's a really funny interaction that came up in my final round 5 game where we were going to lose to a Kinnan player. And I had no interaction. Everyone else was tapped out. And then as the spell's on the Sack River, and I'm like, hold on a second. And I'm like,
can anybody use extra mana?
Can anyone use extra blue mana? Yeah. Yeah, and I was able to, we were able to get the stop because I dreams gripped to untap another Kinnan player's island. So that, because there was 2 Kinnan players in that party, and the other Kinnan player was able to stop him. And it was just too funny, man.
That's awesome, yeah.
Yeah. that is one of the funniest parts about Emerald Charm in my list, but I can imagine just a bunch of the twiddles in your list is just like untapping other people's stuff. As like sort of like the Omni like Arbor Elf or whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
I actually have another story, but it's kind of a cautionary tale.
Yeah, go for it.
So, I was up against a Kodama deck, and the Kodama deck was clearly in the lead just based off the start and was setting up to win. And we narrowly were able to stop them. Which is kind of where the story starts. So I made the decision to keep the Kodama in play and try to interact with the other pieces because I had a Gilded Drake in my hand, and I definitely wanted that freaking Kodama. So we were successfully able to interact, and I got the Kodama. So it felt awesome. And next turn, I was gonna just cast Tymna, and I had Ranger Captain in my hand, so I was just gonna put the Ranger Captain into play and tutor up an Esper Sentinel, and it just felt like the game at that point would have been a win. But this is something that would have come up if I had done more playtesting. But what ended up happening is I kind of realized that Kodama has reach, and I can block my Gilded Drake, and it's probably better for me for it to be in the grave than for it to be in play. And wow, magically the Gilded Drake is attacking me. What are the odds of that? So I block the Gilded Drake, and it goes to the grave, and then immediately the Kodama player casts a Necromancy from their hand.
And immediately
my
punishes
own Gilded
you.
Drake to immediately punishes me to take back the Kodama, and then they ultimately won on the turn after or whatever.
That's funny.
Yeah, so
a similar
don't block
experience.
Gilded Drakes.
Yeah, Morgan
with the Jin Gataxias.
Morgan could definitely
long
relate.
Time ago. Yeah, so I guess my round 2 game was kind of funny. I went to 5, and 2 of my opponents had Gemstone Caverns, which is generally not what you want to see. But my 5 was 2 lands, a Mox Diamond, a fish, and a Jeweled Lotus. And then my draw for turn was City of Traders. So theoretically, that was a turn 1 fish and Cody into a turn 2 win.
Just so disgusting.
The Marin player played a Root Maze, which meant I couldn't win turn 2, but it also meant that my opponents just had no mana for my ultimate turn 3 win, which was pretty cool. But yeah, it was just such a disgusting hand.
Yeah.
Anyone still have any final stories before we move on?
I let me get through a couple real quick. First of all,
Speed run 'em, man.
Yeah. I did want to say my record, not just in like the actual record itself, but also in how the games ended, was like weirdly symmetrical in that it was like 2 draws from like early win attempts into just like stall the game out, 2 backup breach wins after like an initial failed first Naz, 2 turn 2s, and then the finals pod, which was just like a manual bring to light turn. Which was like super weird in that it was just like apparently just like everything came in 2s that tournament until the finals there. Yeah, so I feel like the semifinals and finals pods for me in that tournament might just like live in infamy forever for like what Cody does to unsuspecting innocents, which is like the
And if you guys want to see them, those VODs are definitely still up. So
you can go find those Tier1Con. I'm not sure if they're specifically singled out, but you can definitely go find them. The semifinals pod, seating, I guess seat order, but also seat order was in the semifinals and finals pod was determined by the seed or your results coming out of Swiss. I was top seed coming out of Swiss, so I basically just got the privilege of going first in every game that I played after Swiss, which was
turns out that's pretty good.
Turns out it amplifies Cody's strengths by a bunch. Who'd have guessed? So I ended up, I think it was my second 7, but I ended up snapping off a hand with I think it was a depletion land to a Lotus land and then a Spirit Guide, which makes a turn 2. Not bad. And then that hand also had I believe a Burnt Offering and a Red Elemental Blast in hand as well. So I was like, what? Okay, well, this is a turn 2 with protection if somebody tries to counterspell a thing. And then I drew a Deflecting Swat off the top, and I was like, wow, I'm like actually just home free here. There's like nothing anybody can do to stop me. Great. Just like feeling on top of the world. So I like played the turn 1 Cody, passed. Gustav was on my left, who pretty conservative player in that he'll almost always mulligan to interaction in this kind of situations. Goes land Ragavan pass, and then it goes to Mons, who's on Sisse, who goes land Dork pass, and then passes to the 4th player who's playing Thrastimna, and he also goes land Dork pass, and I'm just like, oh my god, I'm like, there's no possible way I lose this game. And then I untap and go for it, and only Gustav had interaction, and Mindbreak Trap is not good enough when Cody also has the extra mana for the Power Blast. Who'd have guessed? Just sort of disgusting.
Yeah. So I think before I finish off my stories, an important context is that this was the first semifinal pod.
Yeah.
Played.
This was No, I don't think any of these players had actually played against Cody yet this tournament as well.
Yes.
And certainly did not give it the respect that it deserved, unlike in the next game that was played.
Well, so before we do that, I have to talk about my the sketchiest Nas ever.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I went for an early win. I got silenced in response. I think I had like SWAT and Pyroblast or something, and I got silenced. I was like, come on, really? But so my Profane Tutor was exiled, but I did manage to just find the Nas. And so I wound up, while an Urza player was trying to win by just hard casting Tidespout Tyrant, I wound up bouncing the Tidespout Tyrant and then casting Nas while they had no mana. But I was at like 26 life or something, and there was an Elves player who had like a bunch of damage on board. So I wound up nosing down to 9, and like 17 life on a Nos is not that many cards, right? And then so like I get my Nos off, and then the Elf player animates a manland that I like didn't realize that he had, and hit me down to 2, and I had a Crypt in play. So I had to in my upkeep consult for Nature's Claim. And
just
then,
to live through the Crypt trigger.
Just to live, and then I won by using Claim the Firstborn on the other Cody player's Cody to fix colors. And then I cast Grasp to take his consult, and Demonic Tutor to find my Thoracle, because I'd run over everything else. Like Breach was gone, LED was gone, Tainted Pact and Demonic Consultation were gone. So I took his consult, my Thoracle, and pieced together the win. On a 17 life Nas where I had to consult for Crypt to not die. And I did, consult for Claim to not die to Crypt. And I did actually lose the flip, so it was necessary.
Just insane.
Which brings us to my semifinal pod, where so I'm going first because I was third coming out of the Swiss, which puts me highest in my pod. Then it was Inala going second, Krark Sekishima going third, with Kodama Silas going last. And basically, there was like a weird like treaty signed before the game where everyone was like, we're just gonna hard mulligan for interaction turn 1. So I played a turn 1 Cody with a hand that had like an incredibly sketchy turn 2. I could have like cast Rain of Filth to get the mana to activate Cody and then won, but I was like, I don't want to do that. And then all 3 of my opponents played Blue Land Pass.
It was just rough.
And I was like, I have a single piece of protection for this win, which is definitely not going to be good enough here. So we wound up passing a few turns. The Krark player played Krark on turn 2. The Inala player played like a Mana Rock. And then turn 3, the Krark player plays Tavern Scoundrel, the one that makes treasures when you
which is
a
really
very
scary
card in that deck. And then just basically keeps attempting his Submerge until he puts Cody on top of my deck. So I draw Cody, I play Cody, and then the Annual player end step Wizard cycles his Aether Mage for Spellseeker, and just goes for Spellseeker, which is a little strange, considering like everyone in the pod had basically said that they were mulliganing to interaction, and then he just tried to jam an unprotected Spellseeker win. But hey, obviously, so that my only interaction at that point was a Pyroblast, so I had to let the Spellseeker resolve. So then I could honestly say to the Kodama Silas player that I didn't have interaction for Culling the Weak or Unearth or...
Such a politicky thing to do.
I mean, hey, look.
Yeah, no, hey, dude, you gotta do what you gotta do.
So that ate a Swan Song out of Kodama Silas, and then Kark Sakashima cast a Ritual, won the flip, which it was Desperate Ritual, which makes a total, like, is a +6, because you get 2 copies of the Ritual and the 2 treasures from the Scoundrel.
It fixes the mana as well that you feed into it.
Like, mana, it's just, yeah. So then he casts Sakashima, and I'm like, I'm gonna Pyroblast this, because he's got a bunch of mana, and having 2 Karks and a Scoundrel, just the number of ways this goes bad is actually endless. He had Pact of Negation, then he started playing Overmaster, and then played Overmaster, and then he kept playing Overmaster, and then he played Overmaster, and then his count was really high, and he cast an Uncounterable Mind's Desire.
And then the game ended.
Yeah. And then, unfortunately, I learned that Kodama Silas had the Force of Will, but didn't think the Sakashima was a good enough, like, didn't think that he was that likely to win there, and then also, like, didn't counter the Overmaster because it's just a 1-mana cantrip, and then sort of realized, oh, wait, I can't correct my mistake because now I've let Overmaster resolve and spells are uncounterable. Which is a little unfortunate. It kind of felt like we were talking about earlier, you know, people can just sort of decide that you're not winning that game. And, like, I literally, after they all agreed to Mulligan to turn 1 interaction, I tried to talk to, in particular the Inala player. I was like, look, you can't win in the long game against either Kodama Silas or Kark Sakashima. So, like, if you're just agreeing to sit there and do nothing until, like, turn 4, there's no way you're winning that game. And, like, when everyone's mulliganing for cards like Dispel or Swan Song or things like that, the deck that's the most resilient to that sort of interaction is just going to be the one that comes out on top, and that's exactly what happened, right? The Kark and Sakashima came down, and then trying to dispel, like, spells that are being copied 2 or 3 times is just not really a practical way to interact anymore. But, you know, it was definitely kind of a comedic moment to see 3 players all go land pass on turn 1 because they were like so terrified after what happened.
It was the immediate contrast of, like, in the first game it's like the same, like, turn 1 Cody to everybody goes land dork pass and they all immediately die, into the immediate contrast of turn 1 Cody into land pass holding up interaction.
Yeah. So I think, like, it'll be interesting to see how people's play patterns around Cody evolve, because I think, like, you know, I think that we saw 2 ends of an extreme.
Certainly.
Like, both extreme ends of the spectrum, and I think, like, those were both wrong, right? Like,
100%.
You know, particularly, you know, the person going last could try and, like, greed out a bit. Seeing that the other 2 people had held up interaction, it turned out he had a Carpet of Flowers, like he could have played that turn 1, or a Mana Dork or something. Or the person going first could greed out, try and develop, and then force the people after them to hold the interaction. So it'll be interesting to see, like, sort of where people settle on that. You know, obviously it's very easy to get punished. If you're the first person, and the people after you just don't have the interaction, then it's kind of too late. Whereas if you're the last person, you can kind of gauge based on, you know, oh, they held up mana, presumably they had the interaction. So yeah, it'll, like, you know, that experience in that game, it just felt like I could not win, which is why, you know, I initially said, like, I wouldn't necessarily take Cody to the next tournament.
Yeah, certainly. And I do think, unfortunately enough, for anybody who is, like, wanting to play Cody out there, I don't know why you would, but I think the unfortunate part of it is that there's a very visible downside to not enough people holding up interaction, which is that you just immediately die to Cody and you're, like, very much, like, immediately punished for your mistake. Whereas if everybody holds up mana and then, like, you don't end up winning the grind game because you didn't develop as fast, or, like, you're not as good as in the main game as this other deck, which is totally fine for everybody to just, like, do nothing for 3 turns while they make land drops and then eventually, like, slam some value engine or whatever. It's, like, a very, like, delayed punishment, and you're not necessarily going to associate that directly with, like, not having developed enough early. So I feel like a lot of people are just going to end up, like, going with the much, like, quote unquote safer route of not dying to Cody, but eventually dying to the mid-range deck.
And that kind of like reminds me a little bit of Flash, less about like hindering your early development, but more about like that having the doubt that you like not leaving up the interaction will be a problem, which definitely is not a feeling I like to
thankfully, in comparison to Flash, Cody is definitely like a lot more like it shows you its hand. It's just like, well, here's a Cody in play, deal with it, and like there's no guessing game of like, are they gonna win next turn? Do I have to hold up mana forever? It's literally just like, okay, they have a Cody in play, they're on tapping next turn. We now have to hold up mana, and like usually if they're not casting the Cody turn 1, you're like, okay, I have a turn 1 to develop. Like we're fine here.
Yeah.
Cool. So we've got one little bullet point left we want to cover before we move on, and that's: are you happy with your performance at the tournament? And I think this is kind of interesting for only everyone except Reed.
Hey man.
Yeah. No, dude, I wanted to go completely. I didn't want to get any draws. I only wanted to get wins. Shut up. Losses. So I think let's go with worst record to best. So I guess Matt, you start.
Yeah, let's. Okay, yeah. So obviously, record-wise, I'm not particularly happy. No surprise. But if like I evaluate my approach, I think I was, based on like the resources I had, I feel like I'm pretty happy with how I came to my conclusion and being my deck choice, and in some sense like how I played felt pretty good. So in that regard, I'm happy. Obviously, like if I could have done more actual playtesting in pods, then I would probably feel a lot happier, even if my results didn't change. But yeah.
For me, I'm very pleased with my performance. I think my record of 2-3 is completely fine. And I think if I was to run it back and maybe win more die rolls, that improves. But based off the die rolls I got and some of the kind of luck with the gambles that you're gonna lose those every now and then, I think I did well, and I think the deck performed well. And yeah, I'm quite pleased.
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of sort of the gameplay, I'm happy with my performance. I think, I won the games I could win. I kind of wish I'd had the, the guts to take something that wasn't Cody and sort of play my style of game a little bit more. But, I mean, obviously, it's very hard to argue with results, and even though I finished just out of prizes, like 6th out of 87 is still very good, and knowing how close I was to making the finals, with that, like, Force of Will Sakashima interaction at the end, I think it was the right deck for the tournament, even if I'm not happy about that fact.
And Reed, just say your thing, take a bow.
Yeah, dude.
You did it.
Yep. Finally
pulls down the little flaps in his shirt just for.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was happy with the results. I honestly, I think even with some of the sleep deprivation and such, I was still, I think I was playing tighter in some ways than I historically have in tournaments. I like a lot of the time I tend to play by feel, which is a really bad habit, but I don't know. I feel like historically I've relied a lot on just like politicking and trying to like like force my will onto the table with some decks just to like get by in early rounds, and I feel like I took a lot more measured approach to the Swiss in this tournament, and yeah, just like played a like tighter technical. I mean, I wouldn't say that I've ever been like a loose technical player, but I certainly think that I like planned out my lines better here and like did the math on like a pad of paper next to me to make sure that I'm good to go on all this stuff, and like double checking my math and everything like that before going for a line, which is good. I still made a couple of mistakes. Thankfully, it wasn't punished super hard for them. I think I still won the game where I made a minor play error, but yeah. I think I also accrued like 2 GRVs over the 2 days, thankfully 1 per day, so no actual downsides, but you know, could have not had those.
I will say the one thing that's nice about Reed winning the tournament is that, you know, he was the one player of our podcast who definitely needed the duels the most. So now he's part of the cool duel club.
God.
Yeah.
One of the secret narratives leading into the event was Reed's reserve list collection.
Yeah, which were comprised entirely of an Academy Rector and a Gilded Drake coming into this, and so I think this win actually something like doubled, like at least 100%, like plus 100% of the value of my collection, maybe like plus 150%.
Dude, this is just the start, right? You gotta get the rest of the duels to match.
I mean, I started with the most expensive 2 of them, so it's only better to work on from
you
there,
have to
right?
get them in top loaders with tier 1 stickers.
Yeah, I got
next
it.
time
Yeah.
when you win the next tier 1, you are obligated to select the non-value duels to round it out.
Cool. So that wraps it up for the main topic of the show. And we have one topic left, which is everyone's favorite. Gut check!
Gut check.
Gut check.
Say it, Morgan.
Gut check.
Say it.
Yeah.
Do your part.
Say it. Okay. So this gut check kind of relates to the main topic of the show. And I want to know what everyone thought the second best or second most interesting deck, or maybe most interesting, considering I don't think any of us find Cody to be particularly interesting, deck of the tournament was. So Cody can't be your answer. That's why I'm saying like second best or whatever. But
so
Wait,
second
most
best
interesting or best?
more or second best, either or. You can pick.
Yeah.
Why
I
don't
can
we
start that off because it's a
lock
no-brainer
in?
for me.
Okay.
So it's definitely Winota. I
Retweet, dude. That's mine as well.
It is, yeah. Like,
yeah.
So, on multiple axes, like, pleasantly surprised with the result, right? Like, there were like 3 Winota decks. One of them, or 2 of them made top 16, something like that.
One made top 16, and then one of them had a 2-3 record, I think. I don't know what the other,
which is like almost good enough with breakers.
Which is really good. Yeah. Which is so they were very close. Also, like, that kind of deck playstyle is definitely something I enjoy, so it was cool to see that work in the setting. So definitely interesting. Like, I'm not trying to say that Winota is the second best deck besides Cody, because I don't think it is, but definitely if you wanted to grind tournaments and also play a deck that is enjoyable, I feel like that's just like huge intersection there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, my answer is also Winota. Just super cool. I don't know. I played it against a lot of. I didn't play against Winota in the main event, but I played against Winota quite a bit in, like, you know, the post tournament games. And Winota clowns on all of my other decks. So it was super fun to play those and just get absolutely dunked on. Morgan, Reed.
Yeah, honestly, Winota's probably my pick for most interesting.
Wow.
Okay,
actually... I was like, Reed's gonna say a Sararak. Reed's gonna say a Sararak.
Yeah, dude, I can't believe you did it.
No.
In all our casual games, that deck was.
We were talking about at the
cool.
tournament. Yes, a Sararak is by far the best deck I've ever played. That's not an argument.
Someone played a Sararak at the tournament.
They did. I'm not gonna comment on the build of said Sararak deck. I don't think it was necessarily. I don't think it was necessarily the best build. But you know, they did them. They entered it. They get to call the shots. I didn't enter a Sararak, so I don't get to comment on their build that much. But
yeah, it's only because it's the second best.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, dude, Winota, I don't know. Winota's just super interesting. To me, it feels like it's like one of the best decks at taking advantage of having like a bridge in the pod. Like I sort of think about it in terms of like if Winota has like the bridge in the pod for turn 2, because your sort of your weak turn is like obviously turn 1, but everybody's weak turn is turn 1. But you're sort of like your weak turn in Winota is turn 2, and then if you survive turn 2 in a strong position, then you're super likely to just like take over the game. Like again, barring like a toxic deluge at some point, you're just like great. Like stick Winota, immediately get like 4 creatures into play, and then it snowballs every turn after that.
Yeah, I mean that it's funny that you mentioned that because it is kind of simultaneously also the reason why it's not the second best deck. Right?
Yeah, just because
there aren't enough bridges in this metagame. Yeah. There certainly are metagames where that's like consistent and like the QMTG meta.
Dude, Matt, I'm so looking forward to you bringing Winota into that meta because it's so fucking inbred, and I've been telling them for like months that there's other ways to attack this more than just like dropping even more interaction, just playing like fucking bribery and wandering ancient and wandering archaic.
More than going into mid-rangier to the mid-rangiest.
Yeah, exactly.
when Winota's the fast deck.
Honestly, I think the issue I have with Winota is not like, so I think the turn 2 is weak, and then I think whether or not the turn 3 is weak is like a total coin toss, and that makes me really uncomfortable. Like I've seen a lot of Winota hands where it's like, turn 1 you play like, an attacker, turn 2 you play like some mana, maybe another attacker or like some light stacks. Turn 3 you play Winota, you attack with like, you get like 2 triggers. And you, like, one of them whiffs and one of them hits, like, a recruiter that doesn't do anything that turn. And, like, sometimes you flip into, like, Sanctum Prelate and Ranger Captain, and you're, like, just laughing all the way to the bank. And then sometimes you flip into, like, nothing or as good as nothing. And, like, that inconsistency on turn 3, like inconsistency on turn 2 is one thing, but inconsistency on turn 3 definitely makes me a little more nervous.
I just think you don't have to play Winota on turn 3 necessarily. Like I think in your turn 2, I think you're just developing stacks pieces, and then and attackers. It's just reasonable. Then playing Winota a turn later and getting once you've kind of locked the board up makes is a reasonable line as well.
Yeah, I guess like my experiences playing Kenrith was that like, and obviously Kenrith is a lot slower to come online than Winota, so it's not necessarily directly applicable. It's just that, like, the later you start playing your incredible value engine, the dicier it gets, against, like, a Thrasios Tymna deck. Like, it's possible that they've already drawn 3 or 4 extra cards, they're setting up, and if you don't have, like, the right ways of stopping them, like, multiple overlapping pieces, you can get into trouble. But this isn't an episode about Winota. That was just...
No.
Yeah. I think...
Winota special episode win.
Yes.
Yeah, the deck that I found the most interesting, I think it, it's kind of a tie for me. First was the like Staxy 5-color Sisay list. Mons from CDH-TV brought it, and I guess I'll also take this time to say he interviewed us for a video he did about the event, and so we'll link that in the description. It's a good video just going over the whole event and shouting out all the people who pulled it off. And someone else brought like a very similar list to his, and I definitely liked it kind of did a very similar thing to what my Kenrith brew was trying to do, which is like you just get to play a whole bunch of stacks and then still try and find a consistent path to win through your commander. It does it obviously a little bit differently, and like I think I'd want to play a bunch of games on the deck to figure out like, okay, how hard is making Wooburg to activate? Like, what concessions do you have to make that consistent? Does it mean it's hard to play cards like a Null Rod? But it definitely like it seemed to do exactly what like the Kenrith deck I tested hoping to bring it to that tournament wanted to do. And the other deck was Adam from Playing with Power's Lord Windgrace deck. So he was the other player.
Very cool deck.
Yeah, he was the other player with the bounty sleeves, and I just think it's awesome that he, like took a pet deck that's like certainly not meta. Despite knowing the fact that like he was going to be very visible as a player and people were going to be gunning for him, just having the confidence to like, play what he wanted to play and do something that no one else was doing is pretty cool.
Yeah,
also,
certainly.
I played a couple games against it outside the tournament, and man, did it do some stuff. There was a decree of annihilation at one point.
Yikes.
Oh yeah.
It was a bit of a yikes, but that's that's just how it do sometimes.
Yeah, and I almost thought about, well, I said I was thinking of taking a Thras Bruce Brew, and then when that wasn't working out, I did actually look at Sisse, because it does do a lot of the things that I was trying to do in that Thras Bruce list. Very similar to the Kenrith list you're talking about. It's definitely interesting. So maybe it's worth taking a look at again. But yeah, that wraps it up for this episode. If you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at Into the North Pod, via our email, intothenorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a patron, we are at patreon.com/intonorthpodcast. Another way you can support us is via our TCG Player affiliate link, so anytime you want to purchase something from TCG Player, if you use our affiliate link, which is in the podcast/YouTube description, a portion of your purchase goes towards supporting the podcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo, and to our video editor Manta Ray Hat. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
Bye.